My name is Robin, I call myself Snackna, and I'm going to talk about my Men in Black experience I had back in probably year 2015 or 16. Can't remember exactly the year. So I'm going to tell you what happened. I was sort of condensed in my thinking, my thoughts, and I were more like in a teenage kind of mindset. So, and I walked with my shoes on inside. It was dark outside and it was like summer, and it was early evening or night, late early evening. And so what happens is that while I walk around the apartments, suddenly my doorbell rings, like ding dong. I open up the door, and lo and behold, in front of me, what do I have there? This apartment I lived in, it has like an apartment building next doors with caretakers, with personnel. This was like I was, a user or so living. I were living there as a sort of not a patient, but there were these caretakers, that help you out, and you could walk to the apartment, interact with them, and whatever. They were like, it was that kind of apartment building. Yeah. So while I open up the door, and lo and behold, in front of me is one of the caretakers, or so I thought. Something were different with this caretaker. In reality, this guy's name is Björn Ivan, and he has brownish hair, kind of long hair, brownish, and he's like a regular dude. Nothing is strange about him, and he's just a regular guy. And but this guy in front of me, in my door, he looks like this caretaker exactly, except these minor differences. His hair is dyed bright blonde, and he introduces himself and say, "Hello there. Do you see my hair? Look at it." And then it's like he pointed out his features, like he pointed out his shoes, like, "Look at my shoes." He pointed out his features like that, and then I were like, since I were like condensed and in this teenish state of mind, I didn't bother to talk to him. I just, nodded, said yes, and goodbye, basically. So, this guy leaves, I close the door and I walk into my apartment, walking around, thinking about this very odd, strange experience. Then, after a few minutes, my doorbell rings again. Ding dong! So I open up the door, and lo and behold, there's another caretaker. He looks like one of another caretakers, and his name is, in actuality, Christopher. But this guy, while looking like this caretaker, his head being this tall, in actuality, this guy in front of me, his head is like half a head shorter, than the actual guy. And he was also acting strange and odd, and I think he pointed out, like, "Look how tall I am." So, I don't remember what I said or what happened after that, but, basically he went away and I closed the door, and that's it. That's my Men in Black experiences. The next day or some days later, I don't recall exactly, I walk into this caretaker apartment, and there is this first guy, the guy with the blonde hair, but this time he looks natural, normally, as he usually does, and his hair isn't blonde. I didn't dare asking him about this experience, and I didn't ask the other caretaker anything of this experience either. So I asked this guy, "Have you dyed your hair, recently, blonde?" And he looks at me like, "What the fuck? No, I haven't." he said. You know, he were like offended a little bit. I could see in his facial expression. He wouldn't do such things, you know. And yeah, that's my Men in Black experience. These two dudes, replicas of two other people, acting and sounding weird. Yeah, this blonde guy, he was like feminine, like, oh, do you like see my hair? Look at it. And he said something, and it's like he pointed out his shoes, like, you see my shoes? Look at them. It's like, that's a really feminine way, of behavior, faggish. But the real dude, the guy who is not blonde, the real brunette, brownish hair guy. He's like more like manly. He's manly. He's like, he would never act like a girl, basically. And so, yeah, that's my experience, Men in Black. Make of it what you will, but it's very strange for me to have.